Babe, you gotta check this out. I just got this great new plugin. I can't wait to use it. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me on the channel again today. My name's Steve. I'm an engineer and a producer. In this video, we're gonna look at 6 different ways to save on DSP resources with your Apollo Solo, or if you have another Apollo, this will work as well for that too. Before we get started, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment below if you have any DSP saving tips. I also want to encourage you to check out my Console Classic Sessions pack. It's available now. I created each console session preset with ease of use and DSP allocation in mind. That way you can create stress-free, get your tracks down, and have DSP for mixing later. So tip number 1, learn how to record with processing on the way into your DAW. This is a skill that the pros used for decades, and it's one that you should definitely learn. You'll get better over time as you do it more often, and you'll start to learn what you should hear and what you shouldn't hear, what sounds weird, what resonances work, what resonances don't work, and you'll kind of understand the signal flow of what you like. Be sure that once you're done, that you start a new session so you're not having any DSP running in the background from unused plugins. Step number 2, make sure that you're bouncing your tracks to WAV during your initial mixing. So for example, if you record your voice on the way in but you didn't have any compression on that while you were recording, you could add your compression, you could add your EQ, but then when you're done with that and you like the way that it sounds, bounce it to WAV, and then you can release that DSP for later use on your mix bus or on your master. And since you still have the original track, if you didn't like the way it sounds later in the mix, you can always go back and repeat that process and make any adjustments that you need to. And be sure to disable the unused plugins in the previous instance, or just disable them. Tip number 3, very similar to the last step, bounce your effect tracks to WAV file and bounce your buses to WAV file as well. Remember that reverbs take a ton of processing power, and that's the quickest way to save a bunch of resources is to just print those tracks to WAV file. It's actually a common practice among a lot of professionals, and it's an old mixing trick that a lot of people used to do. That's where they would send all of the tracks that they wanted to have reverb on, they'd send them to one reverb, and then they would just print that reverb to a track, and then with a fader they can either move it up if they want the track to sound a little bit more wet and have a little bit more reverb, or they'd pull it down to make the voice sound a little drier. This is very common. This technique will also work very well for something like a sidechain compressor on a drum bus, or an effect like delay on a vocal. And let's take a quick look to see what that actually looks like. So in Logic here, I've got a session pulled up, and I've got a track here. It's a background vocal in the chorus of the song. This is sending to track 13 right here. And on this we have a chord delay, and it's something that we kind of like, so let's see what that sounds like real quick.
I'm on fire, fire, burning up with desire.
All right, so if I wanted to get rid of those instances, what I would do is take an output and route it into a new bus. Let's just say, for example, bus 25, so we can remember that. And then what we want to do is add a track. And then what we're going to want to do is choose bus 25 as the input. And then from here, once we create that track, we're going to want to make sure that we bring this send. Actually, it should be at unity gain already because of the way that we set this up. Let's give this a go. Let's see what this sounds like.
I'm on fire, fire, burning up with desire.
All right, great. So now if we just solo this out, we listen to only this one.
I'm on fire, fire, burning up with desire.
So now we have that printed. We can get rid of this, turn these off, and we still have our delay effect, and we can bring that up,
I'm on fire, fire,
or we can bring it down.
burning up with desire.
Tip number 4 is processing your tracks with buses. For example, if you have a lot of group vocals, send them all to one bus and process that one bus. And then when you print that bus, it's going to be the same exact process that we just did with the effects, where we send it out to a different bus And then we choose that bus as the input for a new track, and then we just hit record. Now, printing your buses this way is another really smart thing that you should be doing during your mixdown phase. That way, if you ever wanted to send it off to another engineer to remix or to master, they have the bus stems and they don't have to build the mix completely from scratch, especially if you're also using any outboard gear. It's a really good common practice that you should be doing. Okay, so to bounce track to WAV file inside of Logic. Now, some DAWs have different ways of doing it than Logic, and you'll have to kind of refer to your DAW that you're using. But just real quick, we're going to take a look at how to bounce a track to WAV file in Logic. Here we go. So I've got this vocal double here, and it's got a Studio D effect on it. I love that little effect. It's great to fit a vocal, a background vocal just kind of behind the lead vocal there. I love doing that. But let's say I want to get rid of that. What I can do is I can right click and go bounce in place. And then what we want to do here is just rename it. Now it names it BIP for bounce in place, but we're going to just name it testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then now your UAD software is going to process that, and then it's going to bounce it into a new track. All right. And so you can see that it's left this original alone, and now we have this new one. And let's take a listen.
I'm on fire, fire, burning up with.
Same exact sound there, so super easy to do, and now all I got to do is just make sure that I turn off the previous instance of whatever effect that I had running at the time. So tip number 5 and tip number 6, they're kind of similar, but they're opposite of each other. So tip number 5, make sure that you use the non-legacy plugins on, and I recommend this. This is just something I've picked up along the way. Use the non-legacy plugins on like your lead instruments and your lead vocals, things that are going to stand out in the mix and be really prominent. Whereas tip number 6, use the legacy plugins on things like background vocals or like a rhythm guitar, just something that's sitting in the mix but isn't going to have as much attention drawn to it because it's not as prominent. This will save on resources overall and will help you get to the point to where you have your mix built. And this will help you get to the point where you feel comfortable in building a larger session and not straining the CPU usage so much or the DSP resources so much. And again, remember, you can use legacy plugins on buses as well, so a great way to do it. Okay, so final thought here is that if you're following these tips, you should get a lot further in your mixes before you ever run out of DSP, and it's also going to make you a whiz at building the sounds that you want to have and getting them from the start. For more on this, check out my Console Classic Sessions pack. You'll get all the classic sounds that you can find in pretty much any studio, and it'll help you save DSP when you print it on the way into your DAW. This will help keep the creativity flowing and the tracks sounding great. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Until next time, we'll see you later.